Good evening, everyone. The time is now 5:15. I'm calling to order the Monday, December 20th, 2021 Finance and Purchasing Committee. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moiseo? Here. Alderman Hayes?
Here.
Alderman Florian?
Here.
Alderman Rivera?
Present.
Alderman Newsom?
Present. Item C, approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 15th, 2021 Finance and Purchasing Committee. First by Alderman Rivera.
Second.
Second by Alderman Florian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item D, approval of the minutes from December 6th, 2021 Special Finance and Purchasing Committee. Motion by Alderman Rivera, second by Alderman Hayes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item E, public comment. Is there anyone that wants to speak regarding anything that's on the Finance and Purchasing Committee agenda? Being none, we'll move to new business. I'll entertain a motion to bring up the audit presentation by Alderman Moiseo.
I'll second that.
Second by Alderman Rivera to bring up item, what is that on there? Item H on reports and communication. Mr. Schultz? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Alderman. As you all know, this was a very difficult year as we addressed the effects of COVID citywide. It had a tremendous effect on provision of services, on the cost of services. It affected our revenue stream. And what even made it a more difficult year was the personnel changes in the finance department that happened well into the new fiscal year. And I'm very, very grateful to how the finance staff, they all stepped forward to the challenge. They worked long, excruciating hours. And with the assistance of Martha Trotter from Sikich, who's sitting in the second row, the senior audit manager from Sikich, who worked with us on the audit, devoting considerable time and not only on the audit, but a good deal of training necessary for us all to be on board. And I'm very grateful for Martha's assistance and, of course, for the assistance of everyone in the finance department. You're all familiar with the audit, the way it's and with our financial report, the way it's organized. But just to give you a brief summation, if you look in your financials, you'll see that the annual financial report is broken down basically into three primary sections. There is an introductory section, which will show the list of principal officials, an organization chart for the city, a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting, which the city has been honored with by GFOA for a great number of years now, and the letter of transmittal, which tries to summarize the major activity that's presented in the audit. Secondly is the financial section. Here you're going to find the opinion or the report from the independent auditor from Sikich, and I'm happy to note that we received an unmodified or unqualified or clean opinion, however you want to put it, from the auditors and the presentation of our financial statements. Following the letter of transmittal, the auditor's report will be the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. Then follows the government-wide financial statements. We'll talk about that in a few minutes because the way the audit is presented is much different from how we do our budget. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Following the citywide financial statements, you'll have the fund statements, financial statements by fund type. Then the notes to the financial statements, followed by required supplementary information, the RSIs. The statistical section, which is always fun to work on, breaks down the financial activity in a number of different areas. One is financial trends. So you can see a history of 10 years of financial activity. Revenue capacity, debt capacity, demographic and economic information about the city, and operating information. Slides 4 and 5 show the separation of different fund types that make up the citywide activity statements. When we budget primarily, as you know, by fund type. We'll budget the general fund, we'll budget the 13, 14, 15 special revenue funds, we'll budget the enterprise funds, water and sewer and motor vehicle parking. We'll budget for our debt service, we'll budget for our pension funds, we'll budget for capital projects. The financial statements are a little different. And we can thank the Government Accounting Standards Board 20 years ago, probably, when they changed the reporting of finances in government to give people a better look at assessing financial performance. Instead of just reporting on fund type, they group your resources and your expenses by activity type, where you may find activities not only in one fund, but in the assortment of funds, where they bring it all together so you know the true cost of public safety, the true cost of planning and zoning and building and public works. It doesn't all show up in a general fund or in one single fund, but it's a collection of activity from the myriad of funds. And the reason they did it is, I think we put here, to make it easier for our investors, our creditors, other government bodies, our elected officials, to assess the finances of the government in its entirety, rather than just looking at one fund and seeing how well the city is doing or not doing. You look at the entire city in its entirety. You can determine whether the government's overall financial position has improved or deteriorated, rather than just looking at one fund. You'll see the true cost of providing the services. It's interesting, you look at public safety, for instance. If you simply look at the general fund, it's going to show public safety expenditures of about $63 million. But the total cost of public safety citywide is closer to $88, $89 million, because it's going to bring together all the costs from your internal service funds, your workers' comp, your liability, your pension costs. It's going to bring it all together and show you the true costs of different activities. It's going to show how the government finances our programs, whether it's by user fees and program revenues, or you're going to finance it through general tax revenues. And you'll understand the extent to which we invest in our capital assets. And we're going to talk about capital assets much later. There are three types of funds that come together in these financial statements. Proprietary funds are used to account for activities similar to those found in the private sector. Goods or services from such activities can be provided either to outside parties, like your enterprise funds. They provide services to our water and sewer customers, or services that are provided to other departments of the city, such as our internal service funds that provide health insurance, workers' comp, liability activities for other departments citywide. Fiduciary funds account for assets held on behalf of outside parties. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our police and firefighters' pension funds, and they're accounted for in fiduciary component unit. Governmental funds account for everything else. It's where the bread and butter services can be found, where you're going to find police and fire and public works, sanitation, building and zoning, and so on. There are 5 types of governmental funds. Funds that are collected and dispersed for restricted or committed monies are reported in special revenue funds. Funds that are committed, restricted, or assigned for the acquisition or construction of capital assets would be reported in either capital project funds. Funds that are committed, restricted, or assigned for servicing long-term debt, your debt service funds. You have resources that cannot be expended at all, but instead they're held in perpetuity, and they're reported in the permanent funds, like a cemetery trust fund. You can spend the earnings, but you can't spend the principal. And finally, you've got the general fund. that accounts for everything else. All the activities not required to be reported in any other fund or is the province of the general fund. Due to time constraints, I'm going to try to go through these. I know there's a great number of slides, and we'll try to get through them as quickly as we can. I'll focus primarily on citywide financial statements and then the results of the city's largest fund, the general fund. Then we'll look at capital assets and our long-term debt. Slide 7 shows the difference between the city's governmental activities assets and deferred outflows and liabilities and deferred inflows. Liabilities and deferred inflows of $493 million exceed assets and deferred outflows of $285 million by $209 million. So your net position at the end of the year in governmental activities was a negative $209 million. This is referred to as a statement of net position. We see that there, for every $1.73 in liabilities, you have $1 in assets. In terms of revenues and expenses in the governmental activities, the assets, well, I should tell you the assets, what's included. Assets include cash and investments, receivables, prepaid items, land held for resale, capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation. Deferred outflows of resources, the use of net assets applicable to future reporting periods, like the amounts related to pensions, amounts related to OPEB, would be included in the deferred outflows. Liabilities include the outstanding general obligation bonded debt, pension liabilities, accounts payable at the year end, accrued payroll, and the like. Now, the governmental statement of activity shows revenues totaling $111 million, expenses $128 million. The change in net position being a negative $17 million. Net position went from 191 negative to 209 million. For every dollar in revenue, the city had $1.15 in expenses. Now, that doesn't mean you're spending money you don't have. Obviously, we can't spend money we don't have. You're spending money that's been accumulated over time. You collect it maybe in 1 year, you don't spend it until next year or the year after that even. Yeah. Slide 8 shows current assets, land, capital assets, deferred outflows, measuring $285 million, reflecting a decline of $2 million compared to the prior year. Current assets decreased to $105 million, mostly attributed to a decrease of $6.5 million in cash and investments, as the city carried out broad capital improvements using proceeds of prior year bond issues. We spent those assets. Capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation, increased by $4.5 million. You would expect that. We spend money on our assets. We increase the value of our capital assets. The city continues to hold a large parcel of land on the southwest corner of the city in the Fountain Square subdivision available for redevelopment. Significant reinvestment in the city's governmental assets was made as a direct result of the availability of bond proceeds since 2018. Slide 9 shows current liabilities, non-current liability, and deferred inflows. They increased by $15 million, from $478 million to $493 million, over the same period of 2020. The current liabilities show very little change, a change of $1 million, as payables due at year-end fell from $3.4 million at the end of 2020 to $2.1 million at the end of 2021. The deferred inflows reflect property taxes that were levied in December of 2020 but not collectible until December 1, 2021 to April of 2022. Pension-related deferred inflows of resources measured $5.2 million in 2020 compared to $31.8 million in 2021, and accounts for the major portion of deferred inflows in 2021. As you can see in slide number 10, when you look at the non-current liabilities, you can see the difference of $9.6 million. It went from 425.9 to 416. You see all those decreases. The general obligation debt was $76 million at the end of 2020. It increased by $40 million when the notes were we paid off the notes and issued general obligation bonds. So he actually took it to 116, but then we retired debt. So debt at the end of the year was 107.7 million. And that's why you see that big increase there. Special assessments went down 116,000. The notes were refunded. You got rid of the 40 million. Compensated absences had a decrease of 1.2 million. Compensated absences is the amount of money that's due if you were to pay out employees for their accrued holidays or vacation or sick time. It is as if it all came due at one time, which doesn't occur, but it's still a liability. Capital leases, whereas they're paying off the capital leases, you expect that to go down each year. Environmental cleanup, we've got the schedule that we keep each year. That should go down each year as we pay according to our demand. OPEB liability, that's the amount for other post-employment benefits for retiree insurance. Goes up as health insurance costs increase, that liability will increase. Police pension and fire pension, you see there was a decrease. That was helped along by $48 million in investment earnings, for one thing, in our police and fire pension funds. IMRF no longer has a liability. That was paid off. It's a 100% funded. Claims payable increased rather dramatically at year end. You had workers' comp, liability, those types of claims that became due at year end. Slide 11 and 12, statement of activities revenues. Program revenues are charges for services, operating and capital grants that are related to a specific activity. Everything else that's not a program revenue, you raise through general revenues through taxes. Revenues reported in government activities measured $111 million in 2021, a $2 million increase over 2020. Slide 12 shows you where the general activity revenues come from. Property taxes, based on the higher levy of 2019, increased $3.3 million. Sales taxes had a big increase of $1.5 million in 2021. Telecommunications tax, a slight decrease over the prior year. Utility tax the same. Other taxes, and you know what those are, the hotel motel tax, the video gaming tax, they took significant hits due to COVID. And they show a decline of $1 million. Personal property replacement taxes, a slight decrease. Investment income was almost non-existent in governmental activities last year. Interest rates tanked completely. Investment income went down $1.4 million from the prior year. Miscellaneous revenue, we show a $750,000 reimbursement through liability insurance in the prior year that we didn't collect, of course, in 2021. So you see the difference in general revenues at the end from 84.6 to 86.5, increase of $1.9 million.
Do you want us to wait to the end to ask questions? Okay.
And if they're difficult questions, we're going to ask Ms. Trotter. Slide 13 shows the government activity expenses, $128 million. I'm sorry, they shouldn't be percent change, that's the percent of total. Public safety accounts for 69% of total governmental activities. Public works, 9%. Interest and fiscal charges, 9%. The total activity expenses, $128 million. Which was 1.2% or $1.5 million less than the prior year. If you look at the revenues on a fund basis, which I always like to do, total revenue across all funds measured $214 million in 2021 compared to $154 million in fiscal year 20 for an increase of $60 million. That's a big increase, but $48 million of that was those investment earnings in the pension funds. The pension funds had investment earnings of, I think the interest was 25% for the two funds. Last year, the pension funds had a loss of $172,000, so quite a big difference. Property taxes increased $3.4 million. Sales taxes by $1.1. Home rule sales tax, income taxes by a combined $1.2. Intergovernmental revenues increased $7 million due to $4 million from Federal CARES Act reimbursement for COVID-related expenses and almost $3 million from Rebuild Illinois funds. Slide 15, in terms of where most of the money came from, you can see 22% from investment income due to the large increase in the investment income in the pension funds. 17%, almost 18% from property taxes, 18% from charges for services and miscellaneous type revenues. And that gives you a breakdown of the revenue sources. Slide 15, 16, uses of the funds. Where did the money go? By fund type. See 30% or $63 million for public safety, $22 million for debt service, $12 million to capital outlay. We spent almost $20 million in capital outlay. Another $7.7 million you'll see very shortly in water and sewer fund. Streets, well, that should be public works and water and sewer, 18 million or 8% or almost 9% of total uses. Slide 17 and 18, we start looking at the general fund. The general fund is the major component of governmental activity statements. Actual general fund revenues total $78.7 million, and we're $2.4 million over the original budget, $2.3 million over the amended budget. In slide 18, you'll see the revenues over the original, over the amended. Expenses and government activities was $1 million. In the general fund, we were $1 million under the original budget, but $1.2 million over the amended budget. The budget was amended assuming that there was going to be a decrease in revenues due to COVID, so the departments were put on alert to amend their budgets to reduce. But due to the extensive COVID-related expenses, weren't able to accomplish that feat. Slide 19 shows general fund revenues by category compared to budget. Revenues for property taxes, pretty close. Other taxes, a little over $2.6 million below. Intergovernmental, who was expecting money from the CARES Act and Rebuild Illinois, and the license permits, fines, and other slightly below. The next chart shows it in more detail by taxes. You see where the taxes were $2.9 million below budget. And you see all the major sources. Property taxes, slightly under. Sales taxes are above. Home rule, pretty much even. Utility taxes below budget. Hotel motel taxes, $861,000 below budget. Food and beverage, almost $1 million below budget. Video gaming, $300,000 below budget. You see why the general fund had the $2.9 million deficit compared to budget. The push tax was budgeted at 1.25, but there has still been no collections on the push tax and should not have been budgeted. But you can see on taxes were $2.9 million under budget. Next category would be intergovernmental. Income tax and personal property replacement tax, we often show as under taxes. They're intergovernmental revenue to the sense that they're collected by the state and distributed to units of government based on a per capita basis. But income tax was $1 million over the amended budget. Personal property replacement tax, $648,000 over. Federal grants, we didn't budget the CARES Act money, but that came in at almost $4 million from the CARES Act. And state grants came in $216,000 over budget. So intergovernmental revenues came in $5.8 million, or $5.9 million over the amended budget, which more than offsets the $2.9 million deficit in taxes. Next slide shows revenues from licenses, permits, fines, fees. There again, it's a total deficit of $771,000 compared to the amended budget. Investment income, you see, was $535,000 below. License fees were below. Permits below. The charges and fees, you can see all these are related to the effects of COVID last fiscal year. You can see licenses are down $800,000. Gaming machine licenses alone were down $739,000. Permits are down $390,000. Building permits by themselves are down $393,000. Fines showed a significant increase compared to budget. I can only assume that the auto red light, the auto enforcement was not budgeted at a proper level. It come in at $1 million above budget. Okay, slide 25. Now you get into, we're on 23. You can go change that. No, I'm sorry. You can go back to, if you want, Sherry, 24. You can see that $1.2 million over the amended budget in the general fund. You can see where police and communications, $900,000, central services, $400,000. Sanitation and fire came in under their amended budgets. The rest of the departments worked extremely hard to try to meet their amended budget, but they had far more expenses due to COVID than anyone really anticipated. In slide 25, we start talking about the business type activities. Everything we've talked about so far had to do with governmental type activities. The business type activities have to do with the water and sewer and the motor vehicle parking system. Assets increased from $111.5 million to $131, a $20 million increase. That's not too hard to understand when you consider that on October 17th of 2020, the city issued $19,675,000 in water and sewer revenue bonds. So those are $20 million. Liabilities increased $14 million. The debt obligations increased from $28 million to $42 million. There again, you had a new bond issue. Business type activities revenues, that'd be the next page. Sorry. Revenues, a 6% increase. Water and sewer is the primary source of the revenues, and you're not collecting a whole lot in your motor vehicle parking system. They're all water and sewer revenues. They increased almost $1 million from 15 to 15.9. Expenses, though, were lower by $1 million in the water and sewer fund. The net position increased by $3.4 million in your business type activities. Slide 27 shows our capital assets. Net of depreciation, land, $9.4 million, same as in 2020. Land improvements, $2.4 million. Construction in progress, $8 million. You took on a lot of projects last year. Buildings, some slight depreciation there. The same is true with machinery and equipment. Infrastructure, an increase from 106 to 109. So total capital assets net of depreciation increased $10 million in 2021. Slide 28. In terms of debt, there are different types of debt in long-term debt. Part of it is your bonds, your debt service type debt. General obligation bonds, $107 million outstanding. Capital leases, $1.1 million. Water and sewer bonds, $34 million. Parking fee bonds, $1 million. Special assessments, $1.4. Total bonded indebtedness, $146 million at the end of 2021. Other debt in slide 29. your net pension liability, your police and firefighters pension unfunded liability of $271.8 million. OPEB, the other post-employment benefits, $13 million. We said that was for retiree health insurance. Compensated absences, if you were pay out all your compensated absences, is $6.4 million. Claims payable at year end, 5.9. The ARO, you have that agreement in water and sewer associated with the eventual removal of retired water intakes. The liability is $2.7 million to remove those intakes as they become completely retired. And the environmental for the Yeoman Creek landfill cleanup, $1.7 million outstanding. There's your $302 million in other long-term debt. Capital improvements, almost $20 million in 2021. You had water, sewer infrastructure improvements, plant upgrades, water main replacements, storm and sanitary sewer maintenance upgrades, totaling $7.7 million. Additional sum of $12 million in the city's governmental funds, including streets, sidewalks, alleys, new fueling station to Public Works, facility improvements to the Public Works building, the City Hall, to the Police Department, and various Fire Department improvements, street lighting and traffic signal maintenance or upgrades, culvert inspections and repairs, demolitions within the lakefront TIF. We purchased a fully equipped police vehicle, 3 skid, steer, loaders in Public Works, a Public Works bucket truck, a Fire Department ladder, and a sewer vacuum truck. All these are new significant improvements and additions to our capital assets. Finally, in 31, we're going to look at nice pictures. 32, we're always interested in fund balance, although fund balance really doesn't tell the whole story, but we're always interested in the general fund. How is the general fund doing? Yeah, you can see at the total, 31, 31, 28, 28, the fund balance is $28.1 million. Unassigned, you have $18.5 million unassigned, which is 24% of expenditures. Now, GFOA says they have a benchmark of 2 months for us, which is 16.7%, that they think is a healthy fund balance. I've always looked at 3 months worth, at 25%. We're right on target at 24.4%. Unassigned fund balance. The other balances are assigned. That committed, what is that, Sherry? That's the 6.1. I think that's the stabilization fund. And we don't touch that. That's what is that? 8% of appropriated expenditures.
No.
It's interesting to look at tax rates, only because if you look at 2019, collection 20 in fiscal year 21, the city of Waukegan portion of the tax bill is less than 24%. So when you hear people complain about the tax bill, it's not the city's portion. 67% of the tax bill goes to other taxing bodies, not to the city of Waukegan. That's always good to note that when people want to talk about their taxes. The next slide is interesting because it shows the tax base. You went a number of years, you went 4 consecutive years of declines in your tax base. You can see it. In tax year 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. Decreases in the tax base. Now look at it the last 5 years. Healthy increases to the valuation of property in the city. And that's a wonderful sign. Look at the increases, 8.5% last year, 8% the year before, 9.3% before that, 7.9% before that. Since in the last 5 years, valuation has increased 38% in the city. I'd like to think a good portion of that is not only increased value of existing properties, but also new properties and new development within the town. And of course, we're going to have a more detailed meeting with the Finance Committee at a later date, scheduled with Alderman Newsom, when we're going to talk more in depth with the police and firefighters' pension funds. You can see we have an unfunded liability combined of almost $272 million. You can see that the police pension is funded at 45.6%. The firefighters' pension at 46.8%. We all know, we all understand that's too low. We need to get those percentages up, and we're going to talk about how we can do that. Perhaps next month or the month after. We'll talk more in depth about our pension funds. Now I know Martha is sitting there and she's just waiting for difficult questions. Year-end reporting. You see it, all the reports that we have to file at the end of the year, and our auditors file a good number of these. We file a good number ourselves. You have your comprehensive annual financial report, which is now, they've changed the acronym. We no longer going to use CAFR. It's been, I think it's just going to be annual comprehensive, ACFR, annual comprehensive financial report. The management letter submitted by the auditor's communication to the city council, which is included in your packet. The TIF audits that the SIGIC group, under Martha's direction, they've completed the TIF audits, the single audit. GATA, that's the grants filed with the state budget office. Reports that are filed with the federal clearinghouse. You've already approved the appropriation transfer ordinance. Annual financial report, TIF reports are filed with the state comptroller. The city treasurer's report is filed with the county. Illinois Department of Insurance report filed by the pension funds. Continuing disclosure of our outstanding debt filed with Emma. And then we submitted for the GFOA Awards Program the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, for which the annual comprehensive financial report will be submitted. And also for the first time this year, we prepared a popular annual financial report to be recognized by GFOA, and that's also included in your packet. So I think the floor is open for questions. And I've lost my voice, so I can't answer questions, but Martha can.
I know Alderman Florian.
Well, one of my questions he answered as he went through the process, but
Oh, good.
one of them, another question I have is about the pension liability. You and I have emailed back and
Yes.
forth and talked a lot about this. I was suggesting the possibility, since rates are so low, of trying to think about doing bonds. But you had said to me that if we continued paying what we're supposed to pay each year, we will get caught up by the time we're supposed to. What is it, 2040? Is that the deadline?
That's assuming that all the actuarial assumptions hold true.
But by paying what we're obligated to pay, we're on track according to what the state is telling us.
Yeah, I think our actuaries will tell us that, because I was thinking if we pay the minimum by statute, we should be fine. But they explained to us that there's still negative funding, and they would suggest going to the next level on that actuarial
Well,
report.
that is why I think that was one of the reasons before I became an alderman that they put the gaming money in. I think we should consider, if this push tax ever comes through, putting that money towards the pension, since that's gaming money also. I see Alderman Moiseo shaking his head, because it's all gaming money. And now with the casino coming, some of that money should go towards that. And we need to start electing legislators at the state level that are willing to do pension reform, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother story.
Alderman Hayes.
To Alderman Florian's first point regarding the exploration of bonds for the pension funds, given that rates are pretty low, have we at least explored kind of a cost-benefit analysis of whether it makes sense to take out bonds to fix our payments so we don't have to necessarily rely on the actuarial assumptions?
We did, and in fact, as Alderman Newsom joined us, we had a conference with our financial advisors from Spear Financial, who's our advisor on our bonds, and we talked at great length about the pros and cons of pension obligation bonds. And we want to schedule a presentation with our with the board here, with our finance committee, and maybe with the full council, there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into pension obligation bonds. You need to understand fully the risks associated with those bonds.
Sure.
But as long as you feel that you can beat the 3 or 4% that these bonds are going to sell at probably 3% or 3.5%. You don't issue them if the rate's higher than 3.5%. As long as you feel that your investments are going to earn more than 3.5%, you think it's a no-brainer to do them. I think, Alderman Florian, I think you had even mentioned that. But I know.
We calculated we could, or you, I shouldn't say we, because I didn't have anything to do with it, but you said something about like we could save like $40 million or something by the one way you calculated. I mean, that's
what was calculated.
yeah.
I guess I just want to make sure that it's on the table and we're talking about the best ways to save money in the long run. Your understanding of it is much more in depth than mine, but
I think when Alderman Newsom is ready, we'll schedule the financial advisor to come to a finance committee. You're going to have to probably going to take a length of time for that issue, though.
sure.
To
Yeah, we're
discuss.
talking-
It's going to take several months of discussions with the council because there's risk involved.
Lots.
Yeah, sure. I think Alderman Moiseo has a question on this point.
Alderman Moiseo?
Just to piggyback on what Alderman Florian said about the push tax, and any revenue stream that we can find to put into the pension, we can chip away at the property tax, on the property tax bill, correct, Mr. Schultz? Any revenue we can find to chip away to put more money into the pension so we don't have to rely on the property tax to carry it. And that's a problem all over Illinois. We keep saying, I've been up here ad nauseum saying the two problems in Illinois are pensions and property taxes. That's why the state has, opened the doors for everything to be darn near legal. But any revenue stream we can find to chip away at pensions, it helps with property tax relief. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely, yes.
And also, I want to get off on a tangent, but what he just said, our value's gone up 38%. But we got to keep doing that too, because anytime we can make the land we have in Waukegan more valuable, that helps out too. Any piece of property, obviously homeowners, residential has been the key. That's gone up through the roof, I think. So that's a good thing.
And the declines in the tax base from tax year 2010 for those 4 years was really significant because we're at the point today where we haven't quite reached our highest point that was probably
Right.
10 years ago. But Waukegan's not alone there.
No, that was the crash. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about having someone from Spear come in and present a presentation, the same presentation that they presented to us, was it a couple weeks ago? And really let you know the risk involved with this. There's pros and cons, but as long as you understand the risk involved, then, it'll be up to this council to decide.
Okay.
Alderman Bolton? So we can hear you. Mhm.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate on what risks are involved?
You want to speak to that, Don? The risk involved with taking out those bonds for,
If the investment of the funds fall lower than the investment, than the interest rate that you're paying on the bonds, then that's the risk. But over a 20-year span, you know that you're going to take a hit in individual years. Rates might tank in an individual year or 2 years, but over a 20-year period, you're going to earn more than 3.5%. Don't you think?
You would hope.
The risk, politically, the risk is what if it tanks early on, and after you do the bonds, the next year rates go way down and you lose a lot. Then you have to explain that. Or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. But we know over long term, you're going to earn more than 3.5%.
That's why we're going to have someone to come and speak in detail
Yes.
and answer whatever questions that the aldermen have regarding the risk. There's pros and cons. You know, the presentation that we had was maybe an hour, so this presentation, I think, is going to take longer than that. But,
And it will take several meetings.
yes,
Sure.
Thank you.
I have another question.
sure.
don't mind.
Alderman Hayes.
Page 24 on the thank you for all the detail, by the way. But in preparing the presentation, I'm looking at page 24, just the general fund expenses. Do you have a sense of where we can cut, or what you've seen in analyzing the numbers of where we can reduce expenses in any of these line items or other line items? I know there's, potential for additional gaming revenue and push tax, which hopefully will apply to the pensions, but as it relates to expenses, have you seen any significant deltas where you think that there's an opportunity for us to jump on ways to reduce certain expenses?
What is so difficult in the government sector and the public sector is that, especially in Waukegan, 80 to 85% of your expenses are personnel related.
Okay.
So if you can tell me which department we can get rid of people,
Yep.
that's the way to do it. How do you do it? Do you decrease the number of police officers? You figure every police officer you hire, you're going to pay another 50 to 60% on their pension costs as well. But you can't. We're not going to. I don't think we're going to reduce the number of police officers or firefighters or public works employees. So you try to keep some control over overtime costs. Overtime costs have been a killer the last 2 years with COVID, and so many employees out of work, other employees working overtime to pick up the slack. We can't continue that, obviously. You've deferred the replacement of fixed assets in many of your departments. You can't continue to do that. You need police vehicles. You need public works equipment. You were able to help us this year with public works. They got some new equipment this year. Fire got 3 new ambulances, which is good. Police, they need vehicles. The police department itself, that building, I don't know what's holding it up. They continue to put money into it on an annual basis, a Band-Aid approach to continue to fix it. At some point, you're going to have to replace a building department, maybe with one of the vacant buildings downtown. I don't know however the council wants to look at that.
Well, it's really helpful. Thank you for just highlighting the fact that it's 70 to 80% personnel related. 'Cause that's really helpful, and I'm certainly not suggesting that we reduce the head count. I just was kind of curious what made up most of these expenses, and if there's an opportunity to make any.
You'd like to think that you have the right number of people in your individual departments, and that you're not heavy.
Sure.
But I don't think there's a single department will say, "Oh no, I don't need anyone." I think all departments are telling us they need more. More.
Okay.
And Martha came a long way, so Martha needs some tough questions.
Are there any more
Explain to
questions?
us the activities, statement of activities, how that differs from the funds. Oh, whatever it's.
So that they can pick up your voice on the recording.
The statement of activities, as Don mentioned.
Could you give us your name first?
Yes, Martha Trotter. I'm with Sikich,
Okay.
the audit firm. So the statement of activities presents the city's activities on a entity-wide or city-wide level, and the difference in how you're used to looking at your fund financials on a monthly basis, budget versus actual, especially with the governmental funds, the fund activity is presented on a short-term or modified accrual basis of accounting, so you're not including your long-term assets, long-term liabilities. Whereas on the statement of activities and statement of net position, that's presented on a full accrual basis of accounting, so that's more similar to like an enterprise fund, your water and sewer, where the long-term assets and liabilities are included in that presentation, and all the costs associated with the expenses increases or decreases to those assets and liabilities are included on the statement of activities, expenses, and revenues. So certain items that you would not typically see on your fund financials, like your capital assets, your long-term liabilities associated with pensions. In the case of IMRF for the fiscal year ended April 30th, there was a net pension asset due to the investment activity mostly and certain actuarial assumptions that were taken. So those are the types of items that flow through the statement of activities or the income statement side, the adjustments to those long-term items that are not flowing through on your fund financials.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? All right. Thank you so much for coming. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, we will go back to the agenda, starting with new business. Item 2, the city seeks $145,000 in funding to hire and train a permanent and mid-level lakefront manager who would be solely dedicated to the revitalization of the Waukegan lakefront. The lakefront manager will be responsible for facilitating the activities of the city's Waukegan Waterfront Working Group, applying for and fully implementing award lakefront grant funding, and overseeing and managing all aspects of lakefront projects to bring revitalization plans into reality. Anticipated outputs include implementation of a number of prospective lakefront projects, including but not limited to construction of a beach house, picnic pavilion, and public restrooms, and development of a water taxi, emergency and ADA access routes to the beach, and other amenities needed to drive into attendance at the beach and lakefront. Then it talks about increased activity will serve as a springboard for the city's primary outcome. Can I entertain a motion? Alderman Rivera, second by Alderman Florian.
Yes.
Are there any questions on this motion?
Is just sort of the responsibilities of this?
That's this person, and this grant is for, I see UC is for 3 years,
Right,
and it's a certain amount each year
right.
that they'll be giving. But whoever is selected as this lakefront coordinator, this is some of the job duties
Okay.
that they would be responsible for.
I mean, obviously, I would assume during the off-season, they would be looking for some of the
Right, the grants and,
this and that, but
right.
as a person who goes down there quite frequently in the summer, is this person going to be in charge of the day-to-day management? Because right now, it's in the police department's lap, and it's just too much. I mean, like, they don't have enough to do anyway. We've thrown the beach in their lap. I'm just wondering if is that what we're going to charge this person to run the day-to-day operation as far as during the summer months?
I believe it is.
Okay. Because we need a point person. We can't have a sergeant or a commander or, somebody, or David Motley, God bless his soul, has been doing it for 50 years, as the point person for what goes on at the beach.
Yeah, it
I'm
says,
for it. I just want to make sure that
yeah, it says the lakefront manager will be responsible for facilitating activities of the city's Waukegan lakefront working group. There's going to be a working group.
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious. I just wanted to put that out there so people know. That's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
So I'm going to read this motion. Motion to authorize the mayor to execute a grant agreement between the city of Waukegan and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program in the amount of $145,000 for a 3-year grant to be used toward personnel costs for the lakefront coordinator. I have a motion by Alderman Rivera, second by Alderman Florian. Can I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Rivera,
Aye.
Alderman Florian,
Yes.
Alderman Hayes,
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Newsom.
Aye. Motion carried. Item B, motion to approve ordinance authorizing the disposal of personal property owned by the city of Waukegan, specifically a 2003 International Taylor Ambulance, WFD 1649, a 2008 International Taylor Ambulance, WFD 1648, and a 2009 International MedTech Ambulance, VIN number 1HTM, N as in Nancy, AA, M89H 163622, WFD number 1642. Can I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Rivera,
Seconded.
second by Alderman Hayes. Are there any questions on this motion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item C, motion to authorize the proper city officials to waive the bid process and retroactively increase the spending threshold with G&S Services for a not to exceed $45,000 for beach cleanup services rendered. Was in your packet. I'll entertain a motion
So
by
moved.
Alderman Moiseo,
I'll second.
Alderman Rivera. The beach had was quite a busy open season in 2021. More beach cleanups were necessary than originally forecast in order to give beach visitors a pleasant and clean experience. As a result, the city asked G&S to provide additional cleanup services in excess of the forecast amount of $31,800. This amount exceeds the $25,000 threshold for fiscal year 2022, therefore requires the retroactive approval of the City Council. Are there any questions to this motion?
I'd just like to say, kind of
Floria.
piggybacking on what Alderman Moiseo had said at the beginning when we talked about the beach coordinator. I'm hoping we can maybe bring back the beach rangers and do some things where we don't have to pay this exorbitant amount of money to get the beach cleaned up. What would really be great is if we could get people to clean up after themselves, which, if anyone has the answer to that, I would love it, but.
Again, somebody that goes down there almost every weekend, at least every Sunday. I'm not saying everybody, obviously, Alderman Ford. Most people do pick up really well, at least on the north end where I'm at. It's the garbage cans, it's all of that pickup, and GNS, I mean, I've been down there late, close to closing, and those guys do a really good job. But yes, obviously, if we had beach rangers that could do that, that would help mitigate this price significantly. I mean, they have like two guys in those gators running around doing it, and then they got to get all the garbage and the dumps. So it's an arduous task. I can't speak for the south end. I don't go down there much as far as people leaving trash all over. It could be, but on the north end, most of the people that at least in the area I'm around, everybody picks up after themselves.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Have a motion by Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Rivera. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item D, motion to authorize the mayor to award a contract with Webb's Excavating for the demolition of 7 houses on select nuisance properties throughout Waukegan for an amount not to exceed $93,000. Motion by Alderman Florian, second by Alderman Rivera.
So excited.
Is there any questions to this? There were several bids. The lowest, the city received 6 sealed bids, and the amounts were as followed: $92,750, $93,162, $1,300, $182, $600, $328, $970, and $343,422. The lowest bidder, $92,500, not responsive to all the requirements set forth in the RFP, so they went with the next lowest, $93,000.
I have a question.
Alderman Hayes.
Thank you. I'll answer to Alderman Florian.
Thank you.
Call me that. I just want to make sure that if we're demolishing people's property, that legally we have a court order or we follow whatever statutory provisions are required in order to effectively demolish an existing home. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Will the city be leaning the property for this cost, or the 7 properties for the cost of the demolition?
Yes, well, in this case, we're actually getting reimbursed. There's actually reimbursements.
Oh, okay.
So we can ask the building commissioner to.
Thank you, Mr. George. Good evening.
So the city has right now in our budget from the vacant registry about $156,000. We'll be paying the fee to Webb's Excavating from that, and then afterwards we have until the end of January to submit for reimbursement for that money, and hopefully we're going to be getting this from Illinois Housing Development Authority. They had a grant that is still available, even though there's like there's a lawsuit going on and they've frozen any monies after a certain date, but we're still approved for up to $170,000 for reimbursement. So hopefully when we submit reimbursement, we'll actually get that money replaced back.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you publicly for this. There's one of the homes on this list is in my ward. It's been empty 10 years. It's just awful. And I can't be more excited of anything I think I've done maybe tonight other than the beach person tonight, other than getting this house down. So thank you so much. You just mentioned that there's $170-some thousand available and we're only using 93 here. Can we address some other nuisance properties kind of in the near future to get
in our budget right now in the vacant registry? We have $156,000 currently available. There's a couple more checks that we have to deposit in there, so we will have, after this, regardless of the reimbursement, we'll still have about $70,000 left. So we will be able to possibly take down more homes that are on this list.
Okay, good.
These 5 of the houses were from my predecessor. There was a bid last year. It fell through for different reasons. And we added 2 more houses to this project, and one of them being in your ward and the other one being in the 2nd ward, in Mr. Seeger's ward. So...
Well, thank you again.
There are more homes that we have on the list to take down. We're kind of just going in order of as needed.
Thank you very much for being on top of this.
I'll piggyback on
Alderman Moiseo.
I'll piggyback on Alderman Florian. There's nothing more satisfying than getting a nuisance property out of a neighborhood, Alderman. I mean, people have heard me up here for years. It's a haven for crime. It's just, I can't stand it. We've had some, just as a little history, we've had some that have been hard to get down because you can't find out who owns the darn thing. And they give you the runaround about where the title is and this and that. And then, I mean, but 10 years is too long. We've had some similar like that, Alderman Florian, and other wards. But that, that's always my priority one, is to get these houses down that are just beyond repair and all that. So I, again, appreciate that. Thank you, and I hope we got more coming.
You're welcome.
I have one additional question, if you don't mind.
Alderman Hayes.
Maybe outside the scope, but for this committee, but who's responsible then for maintaining grass cutting or just kind of keeping garbage picked up on that property once we've demolished the property? Does the city take that over?
So the city will take it over using that vacant registry fund.
Okay.
Unless somebody comes and buys the vacant land to build on it.
Sure.
That's kind of what we're really hoping for.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to buy it in the condition it's in.
Yeah.
But hopefully if we demolish it to get a start on it, somebody might want to come in and build a small home on there.
Okay.
And then they'll be responsible for it.
Of course. Okay. Thank you.
Well,
No other questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye, motion carried. Item E, presentation and discussion of proposed amendment to the 2021 Annual Action Plan to reallocate unused funds in the amount of $438,972.90 to the program year 2021 in the total amount of $1,236,219.90. I'll let you go and then I'll get the motion.
So
Ms. Garland.
When you came in, hello, I'm Larissa Garland, the director of Cdbg. So when you came in, you had this on your desk.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be speaking from here. So we had some additional funds from prior years that we have not used. In addition, we had funds from last year as well. So how I have it broken down over here, we do our allocation every year with CDBG. We go through the whole process and funding who we're going to fund in the different programs. So with the additional money that we had, I went ahead and re-implemented some programs that we had before, and then added some additional money to some programs that we already had in place. And what you have before you is what I did. For example, Waukegan Township, for their Home Sweet Home program, they received $60,000 of CARES Act funding in which they gave back. They were not going to be able to administer the program or use the money within the allotted amount of time. So we reallocated that money to into the CARES Act Small Business Program. So that's where that additional $60,000 went to. With the Water Relief Program, that's the program that people are at the point of being shut off. So we coordinated with the Finance Department, and we are providing assistance for people who are at the point of being shut off or they're on the shut off list, to provide financial assistance for them to be able to pay their bill to a point. Some we're able to pay all the way off, some we are not. And so that's what we're doing. We actually reduced that by $100,000 because we haven't really had as many people participate in the program as we'd like to see. But I still wanted to have at least $100,000 in there to have money available to be able to help those who would come forward and receive the help. The next thing is the Sidewalk Improvement Program. That was not on the annual action plan for this year at all. So we put that program back on, and we are putting $277,852.05. That was money that carried over from prior years, so we're putting that into the sidewalk program. The next thing is the lead line replacement program. We already had money provided for that one. However, we gave the $150,305 that was reduced from the water relief program to the lead line program. And so I'm working with Public Works Department on the sidewalk improvement program as well as the lead line replacement program, as I know you guys are aware of the federal mandate that we need to address lead lines. And the next thing is we had a beach accessibility project that was already in place. However, we provided an additional $50,000 toward that program so that we can do more with it and be able to provide more assistance in that area. Victory Park, that was a project that we had for program year 2020, and it ran over. So that's just a carryover from program year 2020 that we're continuing to work on. CARES Act Small Business Grant Program. The money that was available initially was $126,570. And so we added an additional $60,000, as stated before, from the Waukegan Township program into that program, so we can provide more assistance. In addition, we also raised the price from $15,000 to $25,000. So the range is $5,000 to $25,000 to receive for small businesses that qualify. The next thing was the Facade Improvement Program. That was a project that was completed, that was going on, started in program year 2020, and it's still continuing on to program year 2021. So I just needed to get that to be carried over. And then we had some funding left over from CARES Act 1 for $24,162.80, and that was carried over from the prior year as well, and we just needed to carry it over to spend it in this program year. So that is what I am presenting tonight. It has to be a 30-day comment period in which we put it out to the public. We also put it in the newspaper as well, make it available online, and then, of course, in the office so that people can come and take a look at it. If they have any questions or comments, they can submit them to me, or they can submit it to Cdbg at waukeganil.gov, or call the office 847-599-2530. Yes.
I have a question.
Alderman Hayes?
The facade improvement program, so was it the case that none of the money was actually used in program year 2020, the 208,000, which is why it's all being carried over?
Well, a little of it was used, and then we just carried the rest over. So the block that we're focusing on is the 1400 block of Washington and Buttrick. So we have communicated with the businesses. We only had 2 that was really, they bid it the first time we mentioned it. So now, since we have actual drawings of what it is that we're going to do, we wanted to represent it to them to see if, to get some interest in being able to get, everybody to be a part of the program.
And the idea here is that we have money available to give buildings a facelift, give
Yes.
small businesses a facelift, and we only got 2 bites when we offered that?
Only 2 bites, and we're basically saying we're going to pay for it all.
Wow.
So it's like when you see, but when people are more visual, so when you see something,
Yeah.
and I know they said before, this is something that people have talked to up and down the street about, and they never had any money to go behind it. Well, we have money to go behind it.
Yeah,
So I feel like it's going to be more successful. I actually just got the new renderings today.
okay.
So I can also provide, those so you guys can take a look as well. So hopefully we get some bites and we're able to beautify that block and make it nice.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a terrific program. If for some reason we don't get any more interested parties, I don't know, kind of it's the owners of the buildings or the tenants that get to make that decision, but can we focus on can we maybe identify another block or a couple of other blocks in the city that might be
Yes,
able
we
to
would.
benefit
Yes,
from
we
it?
would have to.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garland. This is just discussion and presentation. This will be on the agenda in January for a vote after the 30-day period, I understand, comment period, and then it'll come back to the council.
For approval for January 18th.
Yes. No questions? Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
presentation. Item F, motion to authorize the CDBG department to enter into a housing rehabilitation contract for the property at 515 Messina Avenue, Waukegan, Illinois, 60085, with abate all maintenance and construction for a not-to-exceed amount of $26,625. Can I have a motion by Alderman Rivera? Second by Alderman Hayes. And Ms. Garland presented you with a little detailed addendum to that tonight, letting you know the work that's going to be done on this property to rehab it. Are there any questions to this motion? Alderman Florian?
When I was reading through this, I think it was this one, it was a little confusing. They were talking about the carbon monoxide and the smoke detectors and how they had to be all connected. I get all that. But it said it was only 2 bedrooms, but then it mentioned doing like 3 of them upstairs. So they're doing one like in the hallway or something?
So we're on 515 Messina.
Yeah.
So what I have before you, this is what they did in the home. Some items were removed.
Okay, so they didn't do all of them. So this is our work that's already been done?
Yes.
I don't have my microphone on, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I guess, see, second floor, see, this is different, I think, than what I had. So it's a second floor hall
Yeah, the
is
other
one smoke detector, second floor bedroom, another one. It just seemed like a lot of money for smoke detectors, but I know they're expensive because they have to be connected and all that stuff. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Have a roll call, please.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Newsom.
Aye, motion carried. Item G, motion to authorize the CDBG Department to enter into a housing rehabilitation contract for the property at 915 Murfield Avenue, Waukegan, Illinois, with Abate All Maintenance and Construction for a not-to-exceed amount of $35,275. Motion?
Sure.
Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Hayes. Are there any questions to this motion? Rehab just like the previous one. No questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Newsom.
Aye, motion carried. Item H, motion to authorize the proper city officials to execute an extension of an agreement with Avenue Insight Analytics through the end of fiscal year 2022 for the purpose of completing an audit of hotel tax and food and beverage tax. Motion by
Motion.
Alderman Hayes, second by Alderman Rivera.
I have a few comments. Corporation Counsel, we got this somewhat, I don't want to go off on a tangent if you've got information for me to stop me.
Would you like me to explain why this is being brought before you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have known I voted for this originally, but this has been a boondoggle from the word go. I mean, obviously we want to make sure businesses are paying what they're supposed to, but this has been a disaster from the word go. If anybody's talked to any business owners, I mean, especially coming out of COVID, I mean, my God. Okay, go ahead, Counselor, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so just, and you have spoken on this, and your policy points are on the record, and the purpose of this is that the reason this is being extended is not to extend the audit to any additional parties. It's not to expand the scope of the audit. It's that there were a number of businesses that had provided absolutely no response at all to Avenue, and the way the Avenue contract is structured is that the city pays a certain fee regardless if there are collections or not, and if we don't have a determination of what if any liability there is, then we really we're kind of left without either the benefit of the revenue or the knowledge to move forward. So we believe it's in the best interest to complete the audit, and collections or just looking forward into how we administer our taxes in the future. That information is going to be very important, and so that's what we're seeking right now, to just take this through the end of the financial year.
Okay, thank you.
And they're not doing any additional audits or anything like that?
No additional businesses are going to be added to this.
I'm with you. I think it's been a mess. Everything I've heard from everybody, it's not well received. It's a disaster, and I don't really know what the benefit to the city has been thus far. It sounds like we're paying for each of these audits to be done. So I'll be interesting to see how the numbers shake out. But I do want to make sure that this is the end of it. Like, it's being extended to just wrap things up so that we can move on from what appears to be a disaster.
I had an accountant call, he said, I can't get a hold of him. I call Abbott, I can't get a hold of him. I mean, anyway.
Any more questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Oh, I guess it's an aye. I would like to vote no, but it doesn't really make a difference. I mean, it's...
Alderman Newsom.
Aye, motion carried. Item I, motion to approve ordinance amending chapters 14 and 15 of the city's code of ordinances regarding special events. Can I take a motion by Alderman Rivera? Second by Alderman Florian. Numerous special events are conducted in the city each year. The permitting, review, and approval of special events impacts multiple city departments. City staff has worked with Corporation Counsel to prepare amendments to the chapters 14 and 15 to reflect the city's current and suggested procedures. of permitting special events going forward. And the information is in your packet. Are there any questions? Alderman Florian.
I don't really have a question, but I just want to point out, and I don't know if this has happened to anybody else up here, but one of the problems I've had numerous times with these special event permits is they violate the noise ordinance, and then when the police are called, the police say, oh, the alderman said they could have a party. So I ask that we make it very clear in this, when you file for a special event, you are not getting permission to break the noise ordinance. And I suggested that we have a page that just says that, so I can have a copy of that. And when the noise ordinance is broken, we can tell people, because I mean, I've had parties where the walls were rattling in the neighbors' houses, and they're like, well, they got a permit, the alderman said they could do this. Well, I didn't tell them they could violate the noise ordinance. I said they could have a party. Alderman Moiseo?
I agree with you on that, Alderman Flooring, but, I mean, how do we, there's some things that are obviously gonna be a little bit noisy, I get that, but I'm with you. How do you mitigate, I mean, and I think we all want special events. They don't. One, people understand that there's a noise ordinance, and if it's in a neighborhood, it becomes a terrible nuisance. Two, city staff doesn't work for free. You know, police and fire don't work for free. Public Works doesn't. I mean, it could be a small special event to a parade to whatever. Not all special events are created equal. I agree. So we have to somehow filter that out, but I agree. Especially, a special event. I don't think anybody minds noise at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't want your house rattled, but you definitely don't want it rattling at 10, 11 o'clock at night. That is for darn sure. We know that. We get the call. The police are put in a bind because they said, well, the special event's been signed. So that's a very good point. How do we tease that out so that we can have special events that are fun and people can come together, but we don't have it where it's what show. That needs to be teased out. Thank you.
When it comes to the council for a vote, I mean, we get to make that decision. When it's a special event, we get to make that decision on whether it's going to go forward or not.
I guess we have to start putting stipulations. Okay, this is fine. You can have this, but at 10 o'clock, you got to cut the noise out.
I mean, there's a certain hour where, I mean, if people were just good neighbors and think about their neighbor at a certain time, 9 o'clock, you can continue to have your party, just turn your music down where it's only, you can hear it from your
block
party.
Parties and things like that. That's a whole different animal.
Right, different than block parties, but I mean, this year and last year, I think after COVID went into play, many people were setting up tents in their backyards and having these loud parties with loud music, amplified speakers. We need to put something in there that you cannot have amplified music if you're going to have an event at night. I mean, you can have your DJ or whatever, but it cannot be amplified where you can hear it. I know we have the 50 feet ordinance or whatever, but I mean, that's just next door, but still at a 9 o'clock, I think I shouldn't be able to hear a block away that music in my house. So it's something that we have to continue to work on before the summer. Well, can't say before the summer because sometimes it'll happen during the fall and winter. So it's something that we really need to address. Any more questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
Alderman Rivera.
Aye.
Alderman Newsom.
Aye, motion carried. We have our reports and communications, and due to the hour, does anyone have any questions, or can we look at them on our own? And if we have any questions, contact Mr. Schultz or Ms. Sherry in the
Seems
finance
reasonable.
department.
I just want to say I want to explain my vote on the audit. My aye was just to end this. That's what an aye was, to end it.
Understood.
Any confusion on that was to end it. I think everybody's up here. I want
Understood.
to end it. Motion to adjourn, Chairman.
I'll take a motion by Alderman Moiseo, second by Alderman Rivera to adjourn at 6:39. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
I think it's the way the audit